2.4 mile swim, 112-mile bike ride, 26.2 mile run. You've done the training, you've completed the race. You've gone from being a fat man to an Ironman. How do you stay motivated after this? And what is next? Hello and welcome to the Ultra Running Podcast with me, Coach Marshy. Hope you're well and welcome to this week's show. Hope the running is all going well for you. So we have a guest today, and just before I bring that guest in, I'm going to introduce him before I bring him in today. We're going to bring in Ash. Ash is my producer for the podcast, and he knows absolutely nothing about ultra running. So he's going to flip it today, and we're going to flip this. So I'm going to get asked some questions from someone who knows nothing about our sport, and let's see how it goes and what he's got to say. So bringing in Ash. Hello, Ash. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Hello, Neil. I'm super excited to be here, mate. Like to be finally on this side of it.
Yeah, no, it's going to be weird being on the other side of the fence, but I can do it. Before you crack on, Ash, I'm going to ask you a quick question. Do you want to just really quickly give an overview of who you are, but also tell us, do you run at all?
Yeah, sure. So overview of who I am. Obviously, I'm your podcast producer. I'm a podcast specialist, helping people all over the world build podcasts and level it up and do kind of what you've done, which is this show's amazing. Your listeners are amazing. And every week we talk about that. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. And do I run? I have started running since being like helping you with this show and getting to know you over the last like 18 months. I have started running. I do run I do like 5K. I'm like a little baby runner 3 to 4 times a week. Because I'm a gym rat turned into slightly starting to fall in love with the running space. So I can see the love of it, but I'm not an ultra runner by any long shot.
So we'll see if after this you feel like you want to get into ultra running or not, but we'll go from there. So we're flipping it over today. We're giving Ash the microphone, and I'm going to know how all our guests feel and be on the opposite side of the fence.
Yes, mate. I'm taking complete control. I love it. I'm very excited. And we're going to do a few of these, obviously, over time, because I think it's really good for your listeners who are wonderful and helped you get into the charts and do all these cool things. To just understand a bit about you. I think we definitely, by the way, need to do an episode on why you started the show, because I just realized that as you pressed go and thought, we've not done one where it's like, why did you do it and what was the plan for it?
Yeah.
So we need to do one of those. But this week I wanted to look at the thing. When I first met you, you kept talking about this idea of being, you called yourself, it was Fat Man to Ironman. You did it the intro then. And you know, the joke, I don't know if you mind me saying it, when I met you, I remember I said, like, I didn't take you seriously for the first 8 weeks when we were like working together until I found out that you had done all of these incredible achievements. And I would love to talk a bit about Ironman, like doing an Ironman and how that transitioned over to being an ultra runner. Because to me, when I first got into this working with you, I didn't really know the difference. And there's obviously a huge difference from like seeing your guests and seeing where the show's gone. So I'd love to know, like we dive into your idea of how you got into Ironman running, Ironman and all of that. I mean, I wrote something here. It's like 4 miles of swimming. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then the transition over.
Yeah, I think, you know, just to answer that really basic was that I ended up doing an Ironman because it was basically the natural next step on a long line of steps that I got to from sort of starting my running journey. I kind of skipped the whole process. People talk about couch to 5K, you know, you'll be familiar with that. And I think rather than doing that, I didn't do a 5K and I didn't do a 10K. I went straight into doing this half marathon. This idea of, back then when I did it, it was probably quite a big thing. I think, unfortunately, you know, credit where credit's due for anyone who does a half marathon. But right now in the world of running, it's not really seen as a biggie anymore. It's more seen like a 10K used to be seen, is now a half marathon. And then the next step kind of came, and you talk about going up to marathon level and blah, 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 blah. And I was very involved at the gym that I used to work at, was a host for the Cambridge Triathlon Club. And I started to do some work with them with their strength and conditioning work as a PT. And obviously you're kind of in and around those people and they're like, oh, go on, give a little triathlon a go. So rather than give a little triathlon a go, I gave an Olympic distance triathlon a go, rather than a sprint or anything like that. So that then sort of led to that. Then it moved on to the marathon in running. Then it moved on to the 70.3, which is the half Ironman. And then just when we reached 2015, that was that natural progression for me. So I kind of jumped up step by step, but kind of missed the first few steps in all of the journey, which don't quote me, and I'll, all the listeners, I've reserve the right to definitely withdraw this statement, but I kind of wanted to jump there because I was a bit of a junkie for how it made you feel to go long and go quite hard. Hence the sort of 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike ride, and then the marathon. So there I was. And that's kind of how I went from, that's a very brief overview of going from the Fat Man to Ironman.
That's an interesting point. I'd love to hear more about that. I think, is you saying that like a bit of a junkie for that long and hard in regards to the distance, because why that? Because I find that really interesting, because I myself am, as a non-runner or like I find that people who, there's an addiction to being able to do, I myself find this as an addiction, be able to do stuff that others deem not possible. There's something that I find which also to your own detriment sometimes. Is that like, was it a similar thing? It's like this, a feeling of like slightly superhuman endorphin feeling to it.
So I encourage my guests to be 100% honest. So I'm going to do the same. So I am going to just put a little trigger warning here. So, anyone who's got past experience with any triggers around sort of self-harm, please sort of turn off right now. Because for me, going long, you're in so much pain, you can't feel pain anywhere else.
Yeah.
So you can't feel the emotional pain that you're struggling with there and then. So a lot of this journey originated from me losing my granddad on my birthday, my granddad on my dad's side. And then 7 days later, literally on the next Monday, losing my mum's dad, my other granddad, and I was close to both of them. So if I put my time and effort into this idea of long endurance, quite painful stuff, not even mind numbing. People talk about mind numbing. It's not. It's absolutely engaging in some way or another, whether you're using it to sort out your day mentally or whether you're using it just to escape your day. It's actually like this endurance idea of kind of pain. And therefore, if you're spending a lot of time doing that, you can't feel the pain elsewhere. Yeah. And the reason I put the trigger warning in there is because I was once told people can't feel, it's hard to feel two types of pain at once.
Yes.
And I think for me that was where this originated from. And by no means did I ever pre-plan to do an Ironman, let alone become an ultra runner. Just kind of happened.
I think you can see that in people like David Goggins. I think most people would be honest and say that that's how they feel about a lot of that stuff. I think I would be the same. I got into fitness because it was easy as a teenager. It was a way of channeling emotion. And it's a thing, and it is. If you do enough press ups that your arms hurt,
you can't feel anything else.
You can't feel anything else. Yeah, that would be the same thing. So I get that. And I think that's where David Goggins' approach. So I don't think that's, but it's interesting that it can push you to do amazing things. So I'd love to know, with the Ironman, what was that feeling like doing it, and like the whole process? If you think like this achieved, I know you've got the Ironman tattoo on your leg. What was that? What was it like during it? Because to me, it just seems, I mean, I've struggled with swimming, let alone like anything else. Like, so what was that?
Do you mean like on race day specifically?
Yeah, on race day, during it, after it, like that kind of prep. What was your mental state like? Because before we dive into how you're into ultra running, I'd love to know, like, because there might be a lot of people listening to this who are ultra runners who might be thinking about potentially taking on an Ironman. And so it's that, it's not just about transferring one way, that these two things definitely cross over. And because it's endurance, anyone crazy enough to do more than what you should do is going to probably be attracted to the same things. So what was in your what's kind of that pre-race jitters, the actual race, and then post recovery and stuff? What's that like?
So the first thing that should be noted here is that whether it's a branded Ironman, like the red Ironman M, or with the little dot to make the Ironman bit, whether it's that or whether it's a different company that offer them, they tend to start at race start gun time is 6 a.m. So when you're in your hotel, because then none of these are really local to places that are big, they're in sort of areas that have got lots of natural beauty because it allows for the long distance run and the bike rides, etc. They start at 6 a.m. So you're in a hotel and your alarm goes off at 3 a.m. So you're up at 3 a.m. And the worst thing about it is you're pulling whoever's with you at the time, you're pulling them out of bed as well in another room, and you're making sure your dad's up to take you, or, that's my experience. My dad was kind of central to that. And you're pulling people up at that time of day. And then because you've wrecked your bike the day before, it's all part of the process. You've seen visually where you're going. So then you have to get normally a bus to the start, or you drive to the start and you sit there and your bike's racked. It's obviously next to where the swimming lake is or whatever you're swimming in. And there's just this little lull where it's not even daylight, height of summer, but it's still not daylight fully. And there's just this big bunch of water. There's a lot of people. There's the race anxiety that everyone's got, toilet queues beyond belief. Anyone who's done an event in any aspect of endurance or any running event will know what I mean by toilet queue. And you're just kind of standing there thinking, okay, the reality of today is long. Whatever happens in an Ironman at my level of ability, this is going to be long. So, if you're looking at maybe someone who's really going to perform as a recreational athlete, I could be wrong these days. It could have increased and performance may have gone up, but call it 10 hours, right? 10 hours for a good recreational person. That would be kind of exceptional, right? So, this is taking like 12 hours. That 12 hours is the way forward. And then that it might even be then some after that. So you're kind of doing that. You're going through it. You're doing it. You're going through your rituals, all the things that you practice because you've done a million. In my case, you've done 1,000,001 events before it, so that when you stood on that start line, you weren't feeling anxious. And that was the biggest thing that I could say in that first initial part was there for me. I was standing in that kind of, they had what you call a rolling start. So gun goes off and then your chip time goes when you go through the actual start mat, which is just before the kind of diving platform, before you dive into the lake. And you've got your Baywatch boys that want to dive in and Mitch Buchanan it, all of that sort of thing. But the truth is a lot of us just popped over to the side, took a seat and popped ourselves in. The difference between diving in and just popping yourself in and taking a deep breath and settling is probably going to be the difference of 30 seconds. Now, if you're that close to the cutoff time for the swim, then you probably shouldn't be in the race anyway. So, tough luck. That's kind of the way that that's kind of what they design it to be.
Showing off thing.
It is, absolutely. So you kind of do that. And what I realized in that moment, and it was really surreal because it was kind of, the sun was coming up. It was a bit overcast, but the sun was coming up. And I just thought, hold on. Every single one of those practice events where you stood on the start line for a sprint triathlon, the year going up to it, I did lots of practice events. All of those things paid off because I stood there with absolute zero anxiety going, you've been here many times before. You can do this. The difference was I was about to swim 2.4 miles instead of swimming 750 meters. And that was the difference really. And you knew it, but the nice thing about this one, which was the UK Ironman up in Bolton, it was kind of hosted in near Manchester and Bolton. It was in Peddington Flash was the lake, big vast area of lakeland, and it was like a 2-lapper, so you kind of swum and then you came back to the shore, but probably about 100 meters up, and then you got out and had to run back to the start and then swim another lap, which was kind of cheeky because it gave me that little moment where I felt more secure, which was on land.
Yeah.
So it was almost like an interval swim in that way, but it was only 2 laps. So, you're swimming for the majority of time, but it just gave you that moment just to kind of, I don't know, reconsider where you're at, take a deep breath in. And a lot of people just walked across there like I did to kind of gather your thoughts. Because again, the difference between running across there and walking, if you're that tight to the cutoff that you need to run across there, then maybe you're really pushing it and you shouldn't have been in the event. So there was that. And then, yeah. So does that answer your question about sort of how it was before?
Yeah. So what was it like during and then after? That's the thing I'd be interested in.
So the biggest thing that I note is that there are variables on the bike that are uncontrollable. Now, you can mechanically use a error, break your chain by changing gear at the wrong time. But if you forget all that, actually, if another cyclist rides into you and completely mauls your bike up, or, you know, you get too close to the camera motorbikes or the elite athletes that are on their second lap coming past you on the bike, actually, the truth is there's a lot of variables that you can't control on the bike. And I just remember coming down, and it was, you know, being a football fan, it was great that transition 2, T2, the end of the bike, was at the Bolton football ground. They used that as the big car park, and that was where transition 2 was from the bike to the run. I remember coming in and getting to the dismount line, and I come down the hill, and I was within the cutoff, and so it's about 8 hours they give you for the bike, but you can, of course, accumulate anything left from the previous cutoff. So the cutoffs kind of accumulate. So total time of sort of 11 hours for the bike and for the swim. So I kind of accumulated those, and I was well within the bike because of I'd done half an hour quicker on the swim than I kind of allowed for myself. I wanted to get out 15 minutes before the end of the swim and make sure I had that much time, but actually I was a little quicker. So I come down this hill, Dad's on the corner, like, and he just taking photographs of me coming down the bike, shouting, well done, whatever. I got to the dismount line, Bolton Stadium there. My sister right on the dismount line, because obviously I wasn't anywhere near the front of the field, so spectators had kind of thinned out enough. And I just turned to my sister as I got off, cheeky little smile, and go, I'm going to become an Ironman today. And the joke was I still had to run a marathon. Because the way I saw it is, you know, bit David Gogginsy, but you can run, walk, or crawl. You're in control of the run. Whereas the bike, there was always that fear going round. And even a bad puncture, you know, you got your puncture repair kit with you, but actually a bad one, and you've got to kind of hope that one of the support vehicles that's driving the opposite way round of the loop is within a time period close enough to you to give you enough time to fix it and carry on and finish the actual ride. So, but I come unscathed. You know, I realise now since talking to others how lucky I was to be one of the people that got to the end unscathed on the bike. And then, you know, into transition, turn to my sister Faye and go, "Oh, going to become an Ironman today. Don't worry about the marathon." And the joke, to quote you, that's something that I've loved getting from you. But the joke about it is that I've run marathons a lot slower since that day than that marathon. That marathon was 5 hours and 20 minutes, following obviously 112-mile bike and the 2.4-mile swim, which, quite frankly, I would take that right now as a marathon time, where I'm at in my journey right now. So, you know, I think that was kind of going through your head. And then you just get into Bolton Town Centre, and it just was just a bit surreal because you had to run 10K from Bolton Stadium to the town centre, if you like. And then you joined a loop, which with 3 loops of it got you to the marathon distance. And there was just this little shoot off to go down the red carpet and under the big finish line. And every time you got to it, you had to go round again, which was great from a spectator's point of view because there was always a big crowd there. Everyone was encouraging. And obviously, my family were there as well, really shouting at me and supporting me each lap. And then I just remember coming down the hill, and basically the cutoff time is 17 hours. So you got 17 hours to do this Ironman. And they're coming down the hill, and they call at 10 p.m. at night, they call it Heroes Hour. But obviously the rolling start means that the last time you can finish is about 11:30. because of that rolling start as
Yeah.
such. But for me, I worked out that it was about 20 past 11. I'm coming down the hill and it's bang on the start of Hero's Hour. And they put Bonnie Tyler on Hero, Need a Hero,
Your
all that
song,
stuff.
that.
And it was just like, it was weird because the church clock was ringing for 10 p.m. The music came on because it was their Hero's Hour. And I was coming down the hill and my sister was the other side of the barrier. It had thinned out by then because other people had obviously finished, so their spectators are gone. And she kind of trotted alongside me, which was a real moment until I got to the red carpet. Then she went and found my dad and just stood by the side and watched me go down the red carpet. And the most beautiful moment for me was that the female British athlete, British champion at the time, she's still going now with her extreme sports and endurance sports, Lucy Gossett. She gave me my medal, and she was part of Cambridge. She trained with Cambridge Triathlon Club at the sports centre I worked for just before that time. So we kind of knew each other, and the winners and the elite athletes come back and give Hero Hour medals to people. So they hand the medals out. And it was really good that Lucy did that and that Lucy was there and I got to have that moment. And it was just a really good moment for me. And yeah, that was the story of the Ironman. Kind of got carried away with telling it there. It's very
No, it's good because I think your listeners need to hear it, mate. I need to hear it. I think it's interesting because it makes context. So the thing I want to know then is, how do you go from, you've done Fat Man to Ironman. How do you go from Ironman to ultra runner? Why is that a transition? And how do you begin training for ultra running? How did that start?
So the truth is, in 2014, I'd done an ultra marathon the year before Ironman, done a 50 miler. And I was a complete naive marathon runner who thought, yeah, go on, let's give it a go. Like, yeah. And the truth is, as I did finish it, it was the Lady Bower 50 up in the Peak District. And I did finish it. And, you know, you realize on the first hill that you reach after a couple of miles that everyone's walking. Like the guys at the front are walking and you can see them walking it in the distance. And you're like, okay, I've missed something here. So I need to come up with an idea. And you hear about run walk ratios and all of these things that, to be honest, we definitely overlooked. And we were trying to run it like we were, me and the guys that are with, we're trying to run it like we were marathon runners attacking a 50 miler. Which, as I say that now, just sounds ridiculous. But the truth is I got to mile 26 in that 50-mile race. And actually didn't feel anything like the same as I did during any of the marathons that I previously ran. So I kind of had a taste for it, but kind of knew nothing about it, but giving it a go. And then did Ironman, obviously. And then from there, just go back to that point that I made earlier where I said that idea that if you're focusing on this, you're not focusing on other stuff, or it's your release, or it's your time to put the world to rights, whatever it is. And what I realized is that it started to give me this appetite for something that was hard and long. And I kind of fell in love with the endurance thing, but the Ironman gave that, because in Ironman, you do something called brick sessions where you go for a long bike ride and then you go for a run. So I was kind of used to doing stuff for a while, like doing long training sessions. And I really thrived off it. And the truth is, as a secret foodie, as an eater, you know, and I am, even though I work in the fitness world and very much coach running, I love my food. The truth is, endurance sport, you cannot out-train a bad diet. But I'll tell you what, when you're on it as an ultra runner and an Ironman, you can pretty much eat what the hell you like and you get away with it.
Yeah, because you're overdoing it. Because I guess
you know, your calorie burn is phenomenal. So, you know, when you look at the basic principles of calories in versus calories out, when you're doing Ironman training and you're doing ultra training, you are burning a huge amount of calories. So not only did it kind of combat my weight, and I knew that, it also then creates this environment where you have to eat healthier because you need the right type of fuel for that kind of thing as well. So you kind of deal with like sort of emotional eating that way. And then there was that love of that, like I said, that endurance, going long and hard and painful. And that came from Ironman, and it came from the process of building up to Ironman, which then led to the ultra running. And it just seemed like, cliche, the natural next step on that ladder, but perhaps something that was more sustainable, because Ironman training is a lot of hours, a lot of different disciplines. You can't really cheat and leave anything out. Whereas ultra running, you kind of, as much as you need to do recreations, recce's of courses and go running in hills, which around Cambridgeshire is hard, you can still do the training and time on feet from your front door to your front door. So it's perhaps easier to fit it in.
So how do you start to train then? So that's quite interesting. So like that transition, but how do you begin training for an ultra runner? Like, if not as like a Ironman, but how did you approach training? Because if it's different types of training, how do you approach it as a complete beginner technique? I know you've done one before, but you're approaching a new sport in a new way. How do you actually approach training for ultra running?
So I think you have to kind of look at the basics around it and the logic as well. So sports science is a wonderful thing, but there's also a lot of logic that comes before that. And anything that with the word ultra in it suggests that it's going to be pretty big. So an ultra marathon is going to require a long time on feet process. Now, no one can go out unless you're, unless you're Dean Carnesi, who's like almost one of the founders of our sport. He's one of the original guys or done it for a long time. You're not going to go out and run 30 miles. He did on his 30th birthday at the end of a night out, decided just to run 30 miles, which was ridiculous. It's all in his book. But I think like for me and for anyone who's getting into ultra running, at that point, I was never going to go out and do anything more than what you'd normally do for a marathon training, which, just for argument's sakes, let's say that's 20 miles that you train up to. And you certainly aren't going to go out and smash it either. You're not going to run it like as fast as you can. You're going to take your time and slow it down. But your logic tells you that somehow you need to get some time on feet. So what you do is you kind of break it up into weekly segments and go, right, what is my weekly total? And then how can I increase that? But then to allow for recovery and not to overtrain, you perhaps say you're on a 3-week cycle or a 4-week cycle where you have like a lower mileage week every 3rd week. So you kind of take the logic first and realize that you've got to do a lot of time on feet. You then kind of, what I did is break it down into how that is manageable around life. Now, if you want to run good half marathons and good marathons, you're probably quite used to the idea of a longer run. And let's just argue that that's on a weekend, because that's kind of when anyone who works conventional hours would probably have the time to do that. And I'd say even in the gym industry, working unsociable hours, the weekends were still when those runs took place. But then you got to realize what is different to ultra running and compared to, say, marathon running. Now, in terms of your energy systems, we could bore you with that all day, but in a real basic kind of terms, your energy system you will probably manage 50K, call it 35 miles. You could probably run that ultra similarly to a marathon and do the training in that way. But when it comes to going beyond that, you're going to be on what everyone would say is fatigued legs, tired legs. So there's this concept that you don't really have to Google to find out about it in the ultra world, which is back-to-back long runs. And you'll see ultra runners, they are very good at back-to-back long runs at weekends. And pros tend to do it in the week because they're obviously pro athletes. Yeah. So they've got the time to do it there. And that idea of back-to-back. So you might do a Saturday 20 miles and you might do a Sunday 25 miles. So effectively you run 50 miles, but just over 2 days.
Got you.
So you're trying to replicate that process. But right at the beginning of that, realistically, you have to come up with a process that's going to work around your lifestyle and around your commitments, whether that be family commitments. Now, the thing to note at the time of all of this, I didn't have a family. I didn't have a child. So I didn't have that commitment. I had a job which was shifts, which in this case I would say is an advantage because you can train at times when other people can't. Finishing at 2 in the afternoon was always helpful because you could get 3 hours training in before anyone else finished work. and then you could still go do your social life or whatever else you wanted to at the time. So doing it young and early was good. I would say that not many people do participate in this sport at this stage. It tends to be a bit of an older person's sport at times. Sort of, it's not a young professional sport. It's a 40-plus-year-olds. So although that is changing now and the industry has changed massively since I sort of got into it. But that first initial step is you need to work out how you're going to get time on feet.
That's like a moment.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me. I like that. That's really cool. I think it's interesting, the back-to-backs and the like it's all really complex. I mean, I don't know how people could do that. It's insane. You're all nutters, every one of you who are listening to this. I don't understand how you do it. It's mad. It's making me tired just thinking about it. So what has been, your training, you've done ultras now, you coach people to do ultras, hence Coach Marshy, and obviously you have the ultra running podcast. What have been some of the worst experiences that you've had during ultra runs? Some of those things that you think, gosh, this is hard. Because it can't all be sunshines and rainbows.
No, and it's not. And it's not, to quote the Rocky quote, it is not all sunshines and rainbows on this. It is, I think, part of it, and like, you apologize to my past guests to say this, but I think I'll take what they say. You kind of start not knowing you're going to finish. There is an element of doubt. And maybe that's what draws us to it, is that there's always, it doesn't matter who you are, in what race, at what level you're running it at, there is a chance that you will not finish this race.
It's a bit like F1, isn't it?
Yeah,
I'm not an F1 fan, but when you watch F1, it's like one thing could smash it really out of the way. And it's like, there's something about that completely changes the whole dynamic of why you watch it.
Yeah, and game over. It's game over. If someone goes into the back of another car in F1, they take 3 or 4 cars out and some nobody at the back of the grid wins the Grand Prix or whatever.
And I can imagine it's very similar for this, when you're putting so many things, so many different variables, and over a long period of time, where you've got mental and physical issues, not just physical, but mental as well.
And it is, and inevitably it's going to happen to you. And you always think it's never going to happen to you. People talk about it, but I was relatively inexperienced for my worst. My worst one came on my second ultra. And because I'd done the 50, I thought, come on, you can go to 70, you can reach past that 100K mark, and you can go 70-mile ultra. And this was a lapped event as well. So it was 10-mile loops. So it was 7 laps. It was an event called the Grim Reaper Ultra Marathon, which I'm pleased to see is returning as well. So I was going to do 70 miles and turn up to this race. Thought, I've done a 50 before. It's only 20 miles more, which I appreciate to you, Ash, is a long run.
20 miles.
20 miles more. And there we are, and we're sort of in camp. And the race starts, a little bit overcast, a little bit of rain, and then a bit of forecast for sun. And it was all great. So off you go. First lap, no problem. Didn't really eat much. Wasn't feeling hungry. Second lap, I had a packet of mini cheddars. Thought, I have a protein shot here. That will be all right. So then next lap, because you're only running 10 miles until you get back to where you were, you can change your clothes and whatever. Well, of course, as an inexperienced ultra runner, I turn up with 1 pair of trainers for a lapped race. Now, since then, I've learned a lot. You don't turn up to an A to B race without having a support crew with another pair of trainers, or at the drop bag where you're allowed a drop bag, you put a spare pair of trainers in there so that you can change them if something's gone wrong or whatever. And there was this one bit which was on an old steam railway valley part of this route. And it was just complete, like no rails were in there. It was just a valley where the line obviously used to go. And it was soaked. It was soaked through on lap 1 and lap 2 and lap 3 and lap 4. And my feet were soaked, and I hadn't changed my socks until lap 5. One of my runners sort of sat there and goes, "Neil, you changed yet? You changed it. You changed your socks." And then another one comes over sniffing him, Marshy, you changed your socks yet? We ain't seen you change your socks yet. in his Somerset accent, and it was real animated. And I was like, all right, Smithy, I'll do it. So I changed my socks, and that was correct. Anyway, we're out there on the 5th lap, and the dark had come in, and I'd just been having a break and stood in like the start finish area tent where the chip timing was, and spoke to the owner of the event and the organizer and said, yeah, just give myself, I'll just have a cup of tea. I'll have a hot cup of tea with sugar. And he goes, you watch this now. It's Quitters Road, that road there. And he pointed to the way out of the lap. So not even the way in, the way out. And he goes, that's Quitters Road over there. You watch now. Now it's got really dark, sort of 10 o'clock at night, whatever. He goes, you watch Quitters Road. They're going to start coming in now. They're going to walk back. They're going to give up, because it's Quitters Road. And I thought, yeah. Right, I'm going to go get myself ready. Wet trainers, new socks on again. So I didn't change my trainers in 4 laps and then 2 laps, and I'm changing them twice. So out I go, and I've done my 5th, and I'm like sort of running away. Like, yeah, got this, Marsh, you all right? And then sort of went down that valley bit again, and it was dark, head torch, couldn't see much, poor visibility, and you're just kind of trudging through this wet, soaking wet feet, and then you come up this little valley underneath the road bridge. You come around and then come up to the road, and it's just this long 2.5 mile road of nowhere. Anyone who's done the Grim Reaper or does it, trust us, or you will find out it is tough. And you're just going down this road, and there's this little light on the top of the castle, like, and it's like you're running to the light. I'm running to the light. You can just see it because it's literally straight with a few dips and up and down, but the castle light is there. Anyway, I'm going down there, and all of a sudden I'm like, something feels off here. And I was grabbing as if, because I wear glasses, but not when I run. I was grabbing my glasses to take them off.
Yeah.
But I hadn't had my glasses on. And my light was obviously creating circles, and I was seeing circles. So I was grabbing them off. Then all of a sudden I looked up at the tree and I went, what do you want?
Oh my gosh.
What is it? What do you want? And then carried on running. Didn't really know what I was doing. I was like, who was that? And they started chatting to the owls and the birds. And I remember chatting to this bird that I felt like was following me along. But the truth is I must have been hallucinating.
Yeah.
And then I kind of carried on, and this bloke was on the side just sitting there. Go on, mate. You all right, mate? You all right? And I thought, oh, it's not real. It's not a real person. And it was a runner sitting there, and he'd phoned the race organizer to say that he was dropping out, but he needed medical assistance.
Yeah.
And basically I was like, oh, you all right, mate? Managed to switch on for a minute. Stood and had some sweets. I remember that. And then he goes, go on, mate, carry on. So I carried on. And I'm pulling my glasses off again. And I'm like talking. I'm like, oh no, there's nothing there. Don't talk to the trees. It's all right. No, nothing's going on. And then all of a sudden, the van pulls up behind me, having picked this guy up, because I was on the straight on the way back to where the van would go. And the one of the race directors, he goes, you all right, mate? I was like, yeah, why? He goes, you don't look all right from behind here. You're all over the place. You're from one side of the road to the other. You seem to be looking at things that I don't know what you're looking at, but there ain't anything there. I go, oh, don't know. He took my temperature, and my body temperature, core temperature, was 33.8. So I had hypothermia.
Yeah, Jesus.
And I'd obviously been hallucinating.
Yeah.
And the thing was, of this 10-mile lap, I was at 6 miles of the lap. So there I was. I got in the van and I was out the race. I was out, and I had hypothermia, but I didn't really know that till we got back to the tent properly, that I had proper hypothermia. And the joke is in 4 miles time, I'd have got back, got warm, and I had more than enough time on the cutoff to get another lap in.
Yeah.
And I'd have refueled and got new clothes on, and it would have all been fine. But I had to get in there, went in the medical tent, and literally the medic, her name was Anne-Marie, and Cam, they were husband and wife. They had their own sort of ultra medics, they were called. They were the race medics, and they literally, like, I remember my mate another Neil had to pull off my clothes and undress me and redress me in warm clothing because I couldn't physically do it. I was shivering to the point where I spilt my cup of tea on me because I was shivering so much. And they managed after 2.5 hours to get my core temperature back up. But as they took my socks off, Anne-Marie goes, I tell you what, Neil, I've never seen anything like this. This looks like it's from the World Wars. You've got trench foot. And it was the most disgusting foot that you've ever seen. I've got a photo of it, and it's horrendous. And it was all shriveled and everything, and it was just horrendous. So for me, that was the worst moment. And she let me go to the toilet once my temperature got back up, and literally walking to the toilet 100 meters and back, I'd fallen back down to 35.1. So they actually had to keep me in a medical tent all night and let me sleep and kept me warm until the morning when I could stabilize my temperature. And for me, that was the worst experience. But as I probably told it quite animated there, and it is quite funny now. But actually, really, the timing of that bloke sitting on the side having rung to get picked up was crucial, because if you veer off into somewhere out of sight and fell over, that could have been a problem. So, but the trench foot, as she calls it, and the hypothermia, I mean, it went down in our club at the time as like, monumental that Marshy kind of DNF'd, did not finish. And it was quite good. But the best thing about that, the thing that came out of it, is that other Neil and myself, we learned so much in that moment that the next year we went back to the event and I finished the 70 miler, unfinished business and all that. But we went back and we taught all of our new runners from the club what they needed to do to avoid that. Including not using a foam roller as a pillow the night before in the tent, because I didn't take a pillow. So you could argue I was underprepared, but that was my worst experience.
I love that. That's mad though, like scary as well. Like I just find that terrifying.
It was weird.
So want to end up a little bit left on the interview. Just want to ask you one more thing, which is, you've done a lot of running. You've been running, like you told me some of the highs, the lows. What would be your bucket list in regards to like races that you would like to race now in the ultra space? What is your ultra running bucket list?
So I think for me, I'm a little bit cliche, and I'm cliche because it is the well-known races. I wouldn't say I got into this world because of YouTube and the commercialization of ultra running, but there are some that are well known. So the Ultra Trail Mont Blanc UTMB, to run 100+ miles around Mont Blanc in France. I mean, what an experience. So I would like to qualify for that one time, and I wouldn't mind qualifying for Western States as well, which is originally it was a foot race for horse riders, 100-mile race from A to B across this Western States. And the funny thing is the road race, the running race, became a thing because a guy's horse got injured and the horse couldn't keep him on. So he decided that he would run and walk the remainder of the race to finish it. And I think that's kind of its origin. So really interesting. Or, there are stories about how that race originated, and, that really interests me. So Western States is definitely one called Leadville in America. It's an epic out and back, basically 50 miles out and back. So, just for casual 50 miles out and back. And, the one that has become probably within reach quickest in terms of qualification levels is probably Leadville, but actually also the Marathon des Sables, which is the 5-day stage race in the desert. But then, I'm not a big spider person, and I've heard about camel spiders and stuff like that. So not too sure. So, but yeah, no, that's kind of my basic bucket list, really. And actually just to do 100-miler, to do any 100-mile race.
All of them seem way too difficult for me to even contemplate. Mate, I've loved talking to you. Like, this is like probably have to wrap it up, but I've loved it. I know we've got some more planned in the future, but I've learned so much myself, but I'm sure there's your listeners have as well. Like, there's a real interesting transfer. One, about who you are and what you've done, and two, how you do go from that Fat Man to Ironman to ultra runner to then now podcaster in the ultra running space. That's the bit I want to talk about next. When we get a chance, we should do another one. But no, man, I love it. It's insane.
Yeah. No, cheers, Ash. Thanks for coming on the show. So, obviously, the guys might want to look at you and what you do, but I think, guys, Ash has definitely been someone that's helped on this journey and helped to create this podcast, and we've got some awesome guests line up as well coming in the future, and I'm excited to see how the podcast continues to grow and has got us. You guys have all got us in the charts. So on that note, if you enjoyed the episode, if you could just give us a review and share it with anyone who you think might find it interesting, that would be a real help. And also feel free on whatever platform you're on, if there's a comment section, to kind of comment on anything that you've heard in the episode as well. And it'd be nice to see what you think as well. So I hope you all enjoyed the show. Ash, I hope you enjoyed the show.
Loved it.
And hopefully we can all meet here again to discuss more on the Ultra Running Podcast with me, Coach Marshy.